What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another review. And this time we're taking a look at the 2005 Adam Sandler remake, The Longest Yard. All right, let's waste no time. Let's get right into this. The Longest Yard tells the story of washed-up football star Paul Crewe as he is sent to jail and is pretty much forced by the warden of said prison to form a football team in order to take on his team of guards. So yeah, that's the overall story of The Longest Yard. Let's breeze right through this review. I like The Longest Yard. I've always enjoyed this movie. I appreciate this movie. This is a decent sports comedy and a decent Adam Sandler movie. I wouldn't consider The Longest Yard to be in the high echelon of great Adam Sandler comedies. I don't think this movie has. This movie does have a sense of humor to it, but to me personally, if you compare The Longest Yard to a lot of other Adam Sandler's works prior to this movie kind of has a little bit of a grittiness to it. Kind of has like a little bit of a slight darker tone to it, because this movie does do a lot of things. You got the overall aesthetic of Adam Sandler being in a prison. That automatically gives this movie like a different tone and a different feel from other Adam Sandler movies. You have a tone that can be borderline sinister in a lot of ways, since there is a very graphic death that takes place near the end. That takes place at the end of the second act, going into the third act. The guards in this prison can sometimes be very, very brutal towards their inmates. But at the same time, you do have that typical Adam Sandler style of comedy. You do get that raunchy humor, that goofy humor that you're either gonna like or you're gonna hate. So that can also create a bit of that can all give this movie some tonal issues as well, because you're kind of along the lines of, okay, what are you trying to go for? Are you trying to go for this, gritty sports movie with a dark comedy tone, or are you trying to be an Adam Sandler movie that just happens to have him take place in a prison, yet you're doing all these things that we don't really see in an Adam Sandler movie too often? So I think the tone of this movie can be very, misjointed in a lot of areas. But with all that being said, I still enjoy The Longest Yard as an overall movie. I think the movie is funny. I like Adam Sandler in the lead role as Paul Crewe. I like how he plays this washed up football star who was pretty much forced into training a bunch of inmates to be in a football team. But at the same time, these inmates start to become his good friends, especially the character of Caretaker, played by Chris Rock, and the character of Nate Scarborough, played by the legendary and late Burt Reynolds. The three of them have pretty decent on-screen chemistry. I like the chemistry between Rock, Sandler, and Reynolds. Like, that works for me. That really worked for me, and I enjoyed these three in the movie. They had some good moments to it. When Sandler's not doing his typical comedy that you're either gonna like it or you hate it, he's got some decent scenes in this movie that I do actually enjoy, and I got no complaints whatsoever. I like this rivalry that he has with one of the guards called Cromwell, played by William Fletcher. At first it starts off very hostile, with Fletcher constantly beating on Crewe with his nightstick. Then when you get to the third act, during the football game between the cons and the guards, Cromwell starts to develop a respect for Paul Crewe, because he sees how he plays on the field, and it pays off at the end when the inmates, beat the guards, and Cower promises Paul that he's going to stand up for him if the warden tries to do anything stupid like plan a murder that Paul Crewe had nothing to do with on him. So I like that. I think that's a good rivalry. It's nothing over the top. It's nothing like life-changing. But for this movie, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed James Cromwell as like the warden of the movie. He was fine for what it is. He pretty much acts like the overlord. He pretty much acts like an overlord. Has a handful of scenes here and there, but most of the movie is pretty much the inmates against the guards as a whole. And speaking of which, who they got to play the guards is a who's who of a mix-up, and the inmates is a who's who of professional wrestlers and football players. Some of them are better than most. For me, my highlights are Goldberg as the character of Battle, who was this very aggressive, player, and Stone Cold Steve Austin and Kevin Nash, who played two guards, called Dunham and Englehart. I found those characters, especially Englehart, to be hilariously funny. The Dunham character, like he can come across as more of like this is a brute force. But then they do something stupid where he gets tackled, and then they do a joke of him shitting his pants, which pretty much takes away any menace that Austin was trying to give this character at all. You kind of undercut the Dunham character, especially the scene where a bunch of guards are tormenting Nelly by calling him racial slurs, and it's really led by Austin's character. And so, we were thinking that, something like that. He does get the comeuppance by having Swatowski, played by Bob Sapp, take down Austin. But it would have been much, much better if it wasn't done, if there was no, forced comedic punchline at the end of it, is what I'm trying to get at. I didn't care for that. However, I did love Kevin Nash as Englehart, especially when they mix his steroids with estrogen pills, and he starts to act all sensitive and stuff. Kevin Nash is a really funny guy. This movie showed that Kevin Nash can do comedy and can do comedy very, very well. It's a shame that Kevin Nash doesn't get to do enough movies. But I've been a big Nash fan ever since I was a kid. I love Kevin Nash as a professional wrestler, and as an actor, I don't think he doesn't get enough work as an actor, which is a shame because Kevin Nash is a really funny guy and a very charismatic guy, and I enjoyed the bits of him in this movie. The scene, the acting, I had no problem with the acting whatsoever. I thought the acting in this movie was rock solid. I said my piece on the guards, but the inmates, you got Terry Crews, who plays Cheeseburger Eddie, who's probably the most iconic character in this entire movie, and Terry Crews is just always funny. And especially in this movie, I found him to be absolutely just a scene stealer as Cheeseburger Eddie. No complaints. Nelly, he ain't much of an actor, but he was not bad in this movie. He did a good job at playing the country boy. Give him little dialogue, and Nelly is not going to stink on screen. That's all you gotta do. Give him minimal dialogue, and he'll be fine. And to the movie's credit, they didn't overuse the superstar power of Nelly. So that was also, for the most part, handled pretty well. This movie also has character actor David Patrick Kelly in it. I like David Patrick Kelly ever since The Crow. I like seeing him in this movie. He plays like an informant for the guards. He has a nice little role. And his character is also the one who unintentionally sets up a rig for Paul, an explosive that was meant for Paul Rudd. But the caretaker character is the one that ends up dying by a complete accident. This is where a big problem for this movie comes in for me. So, the entire movie, like I mentioned, was pretty much built around Chris Rock, Sandler, and Reynolds, and the three of them pretty much forming this football team together and them having a chemistry with one another. I think it was a mistake for the caretaker Dyer character for the one to be killed off. To be honest with you, I would have had the Burt Reynolds character of Nate Scarborough killed off. I think if Nate Scarborough's character was killed off, it would have gave the inmates much more of a harder edge. And also it would be like a passing of the torch kind of moment. Like Nate Scarborough is the coach, but we'll say the entire movie he was grooming caretaker to take over that mantle. And when Nate Scarborough, has his demise in this movie, it'll be almost as if the inmates were losing their father figure who helped bring them all together. I think that would have had a much better impact as opposed to the caretaker character. That's just my opinion. That's just what I would have done. I think it would have been much better story-wise. And I think it would have made the third act football scene much more impactful. That's what I'm trying to get at. Though, I don't mind it. And I do enjoy the third act, which is basically the entire game of the inmates versus the guards. It's really well done. Got a good use of the soundtrack. It has a lot of moments of comedy and physicality, and for the most part, it works. So yeah. Oh, also, Courtney Cox makes an uncredited appearance in this movie as the girlfriend of Adam Sandler's character. She has 5 minutes of screen time. They don't see her again. She's kind of useless. And the whole subplot of Cloris Leachman's character having a crush on Paul Rudd because he was an underwear model is just weird and dumb, and I don't like it. Just like the stuff with Nicholas Sotoro and the whole running gag of him having an affair with a bunch of gay black men, I thought was also stupid and dumb. So like I said, some of the bits of the Adam Sandler comedy can be very, very just ill, and then other bits can be, you know, legitimately funny. So yeah, with all that being said, those are my thoughts on The Longest Yard. A final grade for this thing is going to be a solid, I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I do enjoy it, and I do like it, and I do recommend it. So yeah, those are my thoughts on The Longest Yard. Let me know yours in the comment sections down below. Like the video and subscribe, and I'll check you back next time for more.